The difference between what makes up an amateur footballer and a pro footballer can sometimes be as thin as a fishing line. There are millions of players that are knocking on the door to the pro level, and you might even be one of them. But something stops them. Sometimes it can be a big, unfortunate event like a career-ending injury, but sometimes it can come down to even the smallest of details. Small errors that over a long period of time builds up to something bigger and forms a gap between the amateurs and the pros that only keeps getting wider and wider. Today I will talk you through 7 errors that you may not have thought of before. 7 errors that can keep you from reaching your dream. But hey, after watching this video, you won't do them anymore, right? Let's begin. Error 1. Ego. I began playing football at 7 years of age, and back then I was a beginner, as we all are at the start of our careers. In the beginning, we do not yet have the skills or the knowledge to perform and play the sport at a high level. And we shouldn't really expect anything else, as we're just starting out. Then, through playing and training over the course of a few years, we start to notice some improvements in our games. We may even start to surpass our teammates and become key players on our teams. It feels incredible to finally see some success after all the hard work you put in, and you feel like you're on top of the world. But there's also a flip side to it. You have probably heard of players having too big of an ego, and there can definitely be a lot of truth to that statement. If we arrive at that point, it's very important to recognize it before it consumes us. But the scary thing about the ego is that it doesn't want you to do that, and that's why it's really hard to recognize it by yourself. Therefore, instead of focusing on what you can potentially be doing wrong, I think it's better and more important to keep a few key mindsets close to you to help you combat the ego. The first one is to always embrace a beginner mindset, no matter where you're at in your career. When we start out as beginners, we feel like we have a lot to learn and we're very keen to get better. However, as time passes and we start seeing some success, we begin to lose this feeling of being a beginner. That feeling is the ego that starts to creep in. We can and should always be proud of our achievements, the success we've had, and the progress we made. But we should always try to keep viewing ourselves as beginners and try to always seek out more knowledge. The second key is perseverance and being okay with failure. In our careers, there will inevitably moments where we make mistakes and where we fail. Our ego, pride, and perfectionism are all big enemies to mistakes and failure. They don't want you to fail because that threatens the image that you have built up of yourself as a successful player. What you want to do is, instead of placing the focus on the outcome, which is outside of your control, place the focus on the effort, which is within your control. For example, this is something we often speak about in the team before our games. Even though the end goal is always winning the games, the focus shouldn't be placed there. Instead, we should focus on our preparations and our effort, which are factors within our control. The third key is focusing on the process instead of the end goal. Think of it like this. Instead of thinking, I want to be a professional footballer, think of it like, I will train, sleep, eat, and live like a professional footballer. We don't want to attach ourselves too much to the being, but more so to the doing. That is actually going to help us achieve what we want, which conveniently leads us into error 2, before and after. This error is a really common one among aspiring players and especially younger ones. So the other day I had a chat with an old teammate of mine who is a pro but at another club. We spoke of how the current season is going and the usual catch-up, but then we entered another discussion of how our lives was before we signed our professional contracts and what we did that got us to that point. What struck me was, 1, the similarity of the things that we did between us, but more importantly, 2, how similar those things were to the things that we do now. A professional contract is the dream for many, and rightly so. The lifestyle that comes with it and being able to do the thing you love and at the same time getting paid for it. Who wouldn't love to live a life like that? The mistake is that they expect the pro life to be drastically different to the life they have before they signed a professional contract. And that is why a lot of players never make it there. Sure, if you sign a really good contract, your life may change in terms of your financial situation or whatnot. Honestly, in the process of signing my first pro contract last year, I had such a rush of excitement. The trials, the hotels, and everything around it. Everything was new and fresh, and I couldn't wait to get started with that new part of my life that I had worked so hard to reach. But then, as the weeks and months went by, I realized that eventually you just get back to the everyday grind and do the same things that you did that got you to that point. I kind of expected this beforehand, but to actually live through it was something else entirely. Obviously, along the way you learn new things and you try to perfect your skills, work on your body and all that, but a lot of it is the same routine day in and day out. What I'm trying to say is that you should live your life right now as if you've already signed that pro contract. That means trying to do everything that you see the pros doing on a regular basis. Now, the excellent conditions and facilities that the pro players have access to, that is a privilege that they have earned. But don't you think they did all that before they signed those pro contracts? You don't think they did the extra gym training, the ice baths, ate the right foods, analyzed their games, and why not? When you finally put pen to paper and sign that contract, you should already be used to the majority of what that life means, in terms of the work you put in and the priorities that you have in your life. So really try to challenge and commit yourself to living a pro life. Because being a pro footballer is not about having a contract in your hands, it's about how you live your life before and after that contract is signed. Error 3. Banging your head against the door. This next mistake was one I did without even really knowing about it, and it was through working with one of my mentors that actually led me to understand something that I had been doing wrong for basically my entire career. When I encountered hardship, what I had learned up to that point was to work harder and do more than everyone else to get over that hurdle. That formula had worked through my youth and my teenage years, but as I approached 20 years of age, it didn't really seem to work anymore. My mentor opened my mind up on this issue, and he said, you can't just keep banging your head against the door and expect it to open. First, I didn't understand, but as soon as I did, a lot of things changed. Instead of banging my head against the door and expecting it to open, instead I looked for the key. Now, I wasn't sure where to find the key, but because I started to look in other places than the ones that I always looked to, which was hard work, I eventually found other ways to move forward and find success. If you are stuck in your career and you feel like you're doing the right things, try to attack your problem from a different angle. If you're not getting playing time, instead of working yourself into the ground, try to get a better view of why your current situation looks like it does. Talk to your coach or someone else who can give you a third-person perspective on why you may not be playing, just to get a different and slightly more objective perspective to your situation. You may have had the wrong perception of the situation the entire time, and now with your new knowledge, you can go back to working hard, but now instead you're working on the right things. Error 4. The traffic light mindset. Now imagine you're approaching a traffic light, a situation most of us have been in many times. Sometimes when we get there, we can just pass and go through because the light is green. Sometimes the light is red and we have to stop. We never know before we get to the traffic light what it will show or for how long we will be there. But we always know that eventually, if we just keep driving, we will always come through. When it comes to our football careers, we should adopt the same mindset, but many players make the mistake of not doing that. What I mean by this is that we never know what situations we will encounter in our careers. And we can't really prepare for them other than to fill up the tank and keep our car in prime condition, which we do through our training and our preparation. Some players believe that when they approach this traffic light, that the light will always be green and not even expect it to turn red, and that it will just be plain sailing for them and that everything will come easy. Or, and I think this is more common, that once they get to that traffic light and it shows red and they stay there for a long while, they don't expect it to go back to green. But as long as you have the intention to keep on driving, you will eventually come through. In the end, what this little analogy boils down to is patience and persistence, two qualities that are absolutely vital whatever you want to do in your life, especially in a career as competitive as professional football. Error 5. Overcomplicating. This is another really common error that I see, and it's not that weird when you look at today's social media landscape. Whether it's here on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, there are thousands and thousands of theories on why this one specific training method will get you all the results that you want. When you haven't yet built up the knowledge and you're still very impressionable, all these methods often do more harm than good because one, they often show more flashy things that often get more traction online than something simple, and two, because you never know where to start and you feel like you should get all these fancy equipment and these training programs to do some crazy advanced exercises. I definitely been there myself and I know how hard it can be, but let me tell you, the absolute best thing that you can do is to keep things simple. Simplicity coupled with the right levels of focus, intensity and consistency is what will bring you the results, not doing a million different exercises that you see on TikTok. Another mindset block that this creates is error 6, paralysis. This error is a substantial one and it's something that I've encountered countless of times throughout my career. And if I'm honest, it still happens from time to time even nowadays. We're all driven by ambition in our pursuit of excellence. We constantly seek the best methods of training, the most effective exercises, the optimal dietary plans and more. This relentless quest for perfection can inadvertently lead us down a rabbit hole known as paralysis by analysis. Here we allow the meticulous planning and overthinking of our lives to take the driver's seat, while the most vital component, action, is relegated to the passenger seat. The consequence? We find ourselves constantly uncertain about the next step, and this uncertainty ironically translates into inaction. It's comparable to meticulously drawing a map of a journey, but then never embarking on it. When we finally muster the energy to take action, we're often too fatigued and mentally drained from the exhaustive planning process. Even now, I must confess that I still catch myself in this cycle from time to time. The difference is that I've become better at recognizing it and then halted in its tracks. Experience has taught me that it's crucial to prioritize action over analysis. You see, it's entirely acceptable to make mistakes along the way. In fact, it's more than acceptable, it's often necessary. These missteps provide valuable lessons and feedback to be able to refine your approach. Remember, the path to improvement is paved with both successes and failures. Over time, these experiences help you to fine-tune your path, and you'll find that things tend to correct themselves if you persistently push forward. So the key takeaway is to lead with action and let analysis follow in its wake. It's through doing that we learn, adapt, and ultimately achieve our goals. While detours and setbacks may be a part of the journey, they are not roadblocks, but stepping stones to progress. Error 7. Not making mistakes. One of the most significant roadblocks that I faced for an extended period was my fear of making mistakes. From our earliest years, we're instilled with a notion that mistakes are dreaded and should be avoided at all costs. This places us in a mindset of avoidance. We steer clear of actions that might be perceived as mistakes by those around us. This is deeply ingrained in our psychology. But here's the paradox. Without making mistakes, how can we possibly learn? What is there to learn from if we only stay within our comfort zone with things that we already know? For example, imagine you want to become better at 1v1 situations on the field. But every time you find yourself in this 1v1 scenario, you pass the ball away as soon as you get it to avoid the challenge. How then can you possibly improve on your one-on-one skills? Sure, you might avoid losing possession, but you never gain the experience necessary to tackle the problem the next time. However, we shouldn't aim for a mindset where mistakes are disregarded altogether, because that is also a dangerous place to be. The end goal lies in recognizing that mistakes are not just unavoidable, but also essential for growth. They are the trials that test our abilities and fine-tune our understanding. The goal is to embrace this understanding and acknowledge that as we progress, mistakes naturally become less and less frequent. It's not about seeking out mistakes, but understanding their intrinsic role in our improvement. As we evolve, we find ourselves making mistakes further and further apart, a testament to our growth and learning. On the way to signing my first professional contract, I made many mistakes, and you can check out 7 of those mistakes in the video up here. Mistakes that you may want to avoid, but also recognize why they could have been key lessons in my quest to that contract. Thanks for watching, that's all for this time. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.